I want to begin my speech by sharing with you two real stories that remind me and I think all of us of how state violence can destroy lives and dreams in our own country. The first story is of Abrar Fahad, a second-year student of BUET, Bangladesh University of Engineering Technology, the most prestigious university in Bangladesh. Abrar Fahad posted on Facebook criticizing a deal that then government had made with India, especially Indian aggression. For expressing his opinion, his own classmates, members of the regime student wing, terrorist Chhatra League, called him to their room. They tortured him the entire night, beating him with cricket stump and construction materials, kicking and punching him for hours, the whole night. When he begged for water, they denied him even a single drop. By dawn, Abrar was died. The second story is of Bishwajit Dash, a tailor from Old Dhaka. He was not a political activist, just an ordinary man walking home for lunch. Yet he was accused of being part of an opposition group and was lynched in broad daylight by those who claim to protect the government. And the third story is of Riago. It's a very emotional story. A 7-year-old girl who was shot dead by helicopter during July Revolution. She had no politics, no ideology, only a small dream to live and play. And during July Revolution, we lost about 2,000 our brother and sister, and about 40,000 our about severely injured 40,000 our brother and sister. So these stories claimed the regime may have fallen, but the pain remains. The silence of the disappeared still remain around us. There are thousands more stories like this. Thousands. We may not know all their names, but their pain is written in the heart of the nation. So today, as we stand together, we must ask ourselves, how can we heal as a nation if we never face the truth? There can be no healing without justice, and no justice without truth. That's why we are not asking for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because reconciliation often means forgive and move on. We are asking for a Truth and Healing Commission. Bangladesh needs a Truth and Healing Commission. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means remembering and transforming that memory into a strength. Dhaka University Central Student Union is ready to play its role in this process. We will stand beside the victim and their families. We will work to create a formal space where the oppressed and the survivors can speak freely, share their stories, and be heard with respect and empathy. Because a democratic future cannot be built on the silence of injustice. It must be built on truth, accountability, and healing. So, as we begin this conversation today, let it be a beginning of a new journey for Bangladesh, a journey from truth to healing, from pain to peace, and from fear to hope. Thank you so much for hearing. Thank you, our honorable guest.
My name is Mohammed Baba. I've been a member of the African National Congress, and I'm looking at you and I remember the days that I was sitting where you are now sitting. I also remember the days of fear, of hope, and sometimes helplessness as well. But before I do that, let me introduce Rolf Meyer. Rolf was my enemy. He was in a regime that I hated, that was responsible for a lot of hardships, not him, but his regime. But today we come here together to show you what can be done. Yes, we must have anger, but what we do with that anger will define our future. Anger can be very destructive, but that same anger, if it's turned to something constructive, it'll define you as a person and it'll define you as a cause. And most importantly, it'll elevate you above yourself and make your cause more important than yourself. And that is the most important. On the way, many people in our cause have died, have suffered. It causes grief, but you keep your eye on the ball. And the ball is you want to create a democratic country and stop the cycle of violence that has started from the time it was colonized, not in February last year. There are structures here that perpetuate it. And you are in a position to change that and change that future. With all the grief, I say take advantage of it and make sure that the generations that come after you, many of you will have children, will have an environment which you had worked for. Now, let me just give you a slight indication of the society we lived in. You must be wondering, where do I come from? You expecting a different person from Africa, am I right? So my forefathers come from Gujarat. And I am a Muslim. I am part of 2% of the population of South Africa. But I say this to Rolf, and I'll say this to anybody with a great degree of arrogance and pride, that the rights I enjoy and my two daughters enjoy, they enjoy rights that is equal or even better to rights anywhere else in the world, especially Muslim countries. And that didn't happen overnight. And that didn't happen. And I live in a country which is 75 to 80% Christian. That didn't happen because we had bigger guns or we had more power. That happened because we aligned ourselves to a vision where everybody is equal before the law and you are accountable for your actions. But to get there are many compromises you have to make. There are many issues that you have to address, difficult as they may be. So the fact that Rolf and I are sitting here today, I had to understand Rolf. Rolf's people were themselves subject to a genocide. They fought the British, and the British massacred many, many women and children, his people. But then when his people got into power, they also became a part of a repressive regime. And I try to understand, how do you do this? Why? Of all people, you should know what it is like to feel pain. But you begin to understand fear, that many people act out of fear. And we understood his fear. The issue I am raising is, when we are protesting, try and understand your enemy. It'll help your strategy, it'll help your approach, and it'll help you, most importantly, to build a country and heal a country. It's difficult, it requires maturity, but it has to be done. But strategically, you know where the touch points are and what you have to address. So let me just tell you a little about South Africa, and then you'll get a sense of what happened. And there are similarities between what happened in July last year here, and there was an event that took place in South Africa. But before I come to that, in South Africa there were 4 classifications. You were either white, Indian, that means if your forefathers came from the subcontinent here, colored, so there were quiet relationships between black and white couples, and of course there were, along the years, there were children born of these relationships, and we called them colored. And then the last were the indigenous people, who were called African. Now it wasn't just a theoretical definition. The quality of your education, where you stayed, where you worked, what kind of work you got, was defined by your classification. And the difference between being a white and an Indian, there was a big difference. I couldn't live where I wanted to. But the difference of being classified an Indian and as an African was like flying in first class and in economy class. That was the difference. African people were largely used only for their labor. It broke families, it destroyed families, because families were left in trust lands and the males were required to come to work. I say this to you because to indicate to you the nature of what we had to change and what we were fighting against. We had a leadership. The ANC started in 1912. They tried negotiations, they tried speaking to the British government. Rolf and them didn't start apartheid. They just institutionalized it, but it started with the British. They tried everything. And then when we started forming ourselves into more organized political party, our leaders were jailed, including Nelson Mandela. And the regime, as well as us, we thought we finished. But then a spark took place on the 16th of June 1976. Students in Soweto protested against the implementation of a language policy. They forced Afrikaans into our schools, a language we didn't want. It was the language of the regime. And students went on. Suddenly, out of nowhere, our fight against apartheid was revived. But it wasn't done by our leadership, our mature leadership that was sitting in jail. It was done by young people. Many people died. Many young children died. But what it did is it reignited the movement. Now here is the defining moment. The students that were disciplined, that kept to the purpose and the objectives, were people who became our future leaders. What they did not do is subject themselves to anarchy. They organized themselves, and the key thing there was discipline. The student movement was not an ANC movement. We'd like to take claim for it and rewrite history, but the truth is we would be dishonest. But what we did do is we saw the potential here. And when they were jailed and they came to Robben Island, Nelson Mandela and them saw what's coming. They were quite taken aback about these youngsters who were full of energy. But what they did is they put them into disciplined structures. And those became the future leaders of our country, including our present president. So with the kind of energy we have, We need to be constructive. It has to be associated with discipline, and it has to be focused. We cannot allow our enemy to reinforce the stereotype about us that we are just a destructive force. We've got to work against that. Let me also say this, that many of our comrades, your comrades, have fallen. I just saw some of the photographs, some of the most appalling photographs of many of your comrades in the streets being beaten up, many bodies laying. I saw your photograph too. And you've got to ask yourself a fundamental question. How do I give value to that life that has been lost? Do I value this person's life, a friend who's fallen, by becoming destructive or becoming constructive? What is it that I want? Am I doing justice to that life that is gone by exacting revenge? Is that what your friend would have wanted? It is being constructive, and it requires an enormous amount of discipline. Am I supposed to stop because of the azan, or can I continue? Can continue, okay. There was a lesson that Nelson Mandela taught